In the last video, we just discussed the function of VLOOKUP, and we went ahead and talked about the key components like the search key, the data, the column, or the index, and whether or not it's sorted. But whenever we got done with that particular segment, we had 105, this one 105 lot number. It threw off these errors. It gave us an error code, and it gave us this ugly NA in there. And I went ahead and deleted a couple more rows to where now we actually have some more NAs as examples. Now, if you're like me, you don't want to see those NAs. If you've got this really long set of data and you need to sort through it real quick and you need to kind of glance over it, an NA, to me, first and foremost, looks ugly, but it also kind of blends in if you were dealing with large spreadsheets, whereas blank cells seem to stand out a little bit more. Me, I personally am going to want to get rid of that NA. So, how do we do that? Well, we're going to use a function that is called isNA. This one right here. So what an isNA does is it says if that value is an NA, it's going to say true. So let's see how this looks. So we've got this VLOOKUP that's producing this isNA. And we don't want it to say isNA anymore. So what we're going to do is we're going to say isNA. And we're going to type this right in front of our value, our VLOOKUP formula that's producing that NA. So basically what we're doing is we're embedding a formula within a formula. IsNA is not a standalone formula. It's used with a secondary formula that could be producing an NA. And as we know, a VLOOKUP will produce an NA or non-applicable if it throws off or if it can't find that search key. So this one particular one, we said 101. We told this that we originally told the VLOOKUP search for 101 out of our data sheet and tell us what the price was. And it came back, gave us an NA. So I put it equals isNA and I press enter. Before I do that, let's look up what this is. So this is NA, so it says is NA, then value, or you put your formula, and it checks whether a value is an error or is the error NA. And if we say enter, it says true. Well, that doesn't make it go blank, but it at least gives us something to kind of work with. Whereas if we do now on this cell right here, on this B4, we used the VLOOKUP formula. You can see it right there, but it actually gave us a value. So let's see what happens if we do isNA right here. It gives us a false. So what is it doing? It's checking if it produces an isNA, and if it does, it says true. If it doesn't produce an NA, it says false. So we could actually drag this up. We can drag this down, and we're basically going to autofill everything in. And you can see that everywhere that is not producing an isNA, it's giving us falses. Everywhere that does produce an NA, it says true. So how can we use this to our advantage? What other formula, stop and think about it, what other formula have you used that uses true and false? It's the if-then statement. You remember that if-then statement where you say if it is this, then, or if this is true, then do this. If it's false, then do that. Well, we're going to be using that same exact formula here. So, here's typically how I like to go about using these isNAs. There's a couple of steps that I will do. First and foremost, I'm going to use all of my VLOOKUP. I'm going to place that VLOOKUP and drag it down just like you see here. That's the very first step. Matter of fact, we're just going to go through all of the steps of how I personally do this. So I'm going to say equals VLOOKUP. I'm going to find my search key. I'm going to find my range. Remember, lock that in. I'm looking for the third column. I'm looking for price. Price is in our third column, so I say 3. And then, as always, I do false at the end. So then I'm going to go ahead and drag that down. And first and foremost, I'm going to check to see if there is any NAs. Well, there is. So the very next step that I do is I'm going to actually highlight all of this formula and say, and I'm going to copy it. So Control C, or you can right click and say copy. And I'm going to just kind of leave that on the back burner. I'm going to make sure that I have it copied. That's a kind of a key trick here. And then I'm going to say is in A. Then I'm going to drag that down. Now it's all going to be true or falses. Now I'm going to add another formula in there. Remember, I've already copied this VLOOKUP. We're going to use it a little bit later. Now I'm going to use the formula if then. So an if then statement, if you remember, you say if, open parenthesis. So now it's looking for that logical expression. Basically we're saying, is this in A? Or we're going to tell it, say, all right, look at this in A in this, check this is in A to this VLOOKUP. If it produces a true. So basically if is in A, if that VLOOKUP formula produces an in A, this is going to be, this whole formula right here is going to be read as true. So, if the formula produces an NA, what do we want it to say? How do we want it to look? We want it to have a blank cell. We want that cell to be blank, so it's not getting confused with anything else. So in order to put in a blank cell, we're just going to type in a little bit of text. We're going to say quotation, quotation. Or if you want to, you can put a space in between the two quotations. Basically what we're telling it to do is we're going to say, all right, if this formula right here produces an is in A, then we want it to, or produces an in A, we want it to be blank. Now, what if it doesn't produce an NA? What if it actually produces, what if that is in A formula is false? What if this VLOOKUP actually produces a number? What do we want it to say then? We want it to give us that number. And that number is going to be found in that original VLOOKUP formula. So you remember how I copied that formula? Now I'm just going to paste it. We're going to close off our quotation and press enter. Now what's going on? We got our number here. And I'm going to drag that all the way down. So what is going on here? Well, there is no 101 in this data sheet. So there's no 101. So this formula right here, the VLOOKUP formula produces an NA. And then we come in and put this formula in here and say, if it is producing an NA, make it true. So then we use the if then statement to where we say, if this formula right here produces a true, give us a blank. But if it's false, give us that original VLOOKUP. And I just drug it down. Now, why do I want to have it all the way dragged down? Because what if something changes? What if we delete this row right here? If I delete that row, it automatically updates the way I want it to be and throws in that blank. So I want to make sure that whatever formula I put it up here at the very top holds true all the way down to the bottom. So let's go through that whole process one more time with the buyer number. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use VLOOKUP. That's the way I always started. I'm going to start simple and I'm going to do one small chunk at a time and keep adding to my formulas. So we're going to say that VLOOKUP is, we're looking for the search key of this lot number. What is our range? What's our data? So we're going to highlight all this data. We're going to lock it in. And then we're going to look up that index. We're looking for the buyer number. Well, the buyer number is in column 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we're going to go ahead and type in a 4, followed by false. We're going to drag it down. Oh no, we produced some NAs, just like we kind of expected to. So I'm going to come up to this very first column, or very first row. I'm always going to work in my very first row. You want all of your formulas to be the same all the way down these columns. And I'm going to say is in A. And I'm going to make everything either say true or false. So we have another formula here, is in A, of this VLOOKUP formula. I'm going to drag it down. So now we have some trues and we have some falses. So we're going to use the if-then statement next. I'm going to highlight this VLOOKUP, this original VLOOKUP value. I'm going to copy it to be able to use it later. And then before this is in A, I'm going to say if, open parenthesis, if that value produces a true, if that VLOOKUP is going to produce an NA, making the is NA of that VLOOKUP true, then we want it to be a blank. And in this case, I'm going to just use two quotations, not put in a space in between. But if it's false, if it doesn't produce an NA, we want it to produce that original value. So we copied that VLOOKUP. Now we just paste it in there for simplicity, round out our parentheses, and call it a day. And we drag it down. So now we now have effectively used an is NA and an if then statement with our VLOOKUP to clean it up a lot. Now, another thing that I kind of want to bring to your attention, or I do want to bring to your attention, is the way these parentheses are. So anytime you have a formula, so VLOOKUP, this VLOOKUP right here is a formula. There is an opening parenthesis right there and a closing parenthesis. This is in A is a formula. So it has an opening parenthesis and then a closing parenthesis. This if-then statement right here has an opening parenthesis, and we jump all the way back here. That's that closing parenthesis. So as you start working with multiple formulas all together in one large formula, always be cognizant, always pay attention to where those parentheses are. But essentially, that's how you can use an is in A and a VLOOKUP and an if-then statement working all together to really clean up some data. Now, the cool thing is, after all these formulas are in there, if any one of these goes away, it automatically updates our data over there.